Hi everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to help support the show by becoming a premium member, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast to sign up. Memberships are only $2.99 a month. By becoming a premium member, you'll be able to download episodes onto your mobile device and listen to them commercial-free wherever you go. Also, if you'd like to check out the new Dogman Encounters t-shirt store, please go to dogmanencounters.com/store and take a look around. Buying a t-shirt or sweatshirt there is another great way to help support the show. As always, thanks for listening. Alright, let's bring on tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is Kelly Vaughn. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Vic. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Kelly, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I'm a 47-year-old medical secretary. I work at a large hospital system in South Jersey, and I'm also a telemetry tech. So what I do is I analyze cardiac rhythms for cardiologists, let the nurses know what their patients are doing with their hearts. I'm a mom of one, and right now I live in Mount Holly, New Jersey.
When was the first time you heard the appellation Dogman?
I first heard Dogman a few years ago, probably just perusing on the internet, but I really started paying attention when I started going on YouTube, and I never really went on YouTube in just like the last 6 months, and I came across your website, your YouTube page, and I got interested in that, and I got interested in the missing 411, especially the hunters, because my husband is an avid hunter here in New Jersey, and I found that fascinating. And also, I started watching The Cloaked Hedgehog. I think her name is Anna Larson. So those 3 channels in particular I follow regularly now.
You must have been surprised to find out how much information's out there on Dogman.
I really was. If you had said to me, oh, you might have seen a werewolf, I would have probably looked at you like you're crazy. But the concept or the idea of a Dogman, from what I've read, makes a lot of sense. It seems to me like it's biological. It's a creature. Maybe it hasn't been discovered completely yet by science, but I feel like it's a biological, living, breathing, bleeding creature from what I've heard.
How much was your ability to enjoy the woods affected when you found out they're out there?
I've always been in the woods. I grew up in the woods. I love the woods. But once I realized that these things are living and breathing, I'm a lot more cautious. I'm definitely more aware of what's going on around me. I pay attention. I've got my head on a swivel, basically. And just recently, the more that I hear these experiences, I go out armed. I'm probably not armed properly, but I'm still armed. I just try to be proactive.
You didn't realize dogmen are frequently seen near Native American reservations until recently. How did you find out about that?
I actually read a book. I got online and I started looking at some of the books and the information that was out there about the Indian burial mounds and how they're sometimes found around reservations. So that's how I realized that that was a part of their story or their history.
Are there any reservations near where your mom had her encounter?
There is. My mom had her encounter in a town called Pemberton. I actually live in a town called Mount Holly, which is about a 10 to 15 minute drive from Pemberton. So she's closer to a military base called Fort Dix. I'm a little further. I'm 10, 15 minutes from there. But the reservation is closer to me. It's within a 5-mile drive. It's called Powhatan Reservation. It's in a town called West Hampton, which neighbors my town of Mount Holly.
I see. Before you tell us about your mom's encounter, please tell us about the place where it happened.
Okay. It was in a town called Pemberton, New Jersey. It's a small farming community, very rural. In fact, the road that I lived on, there were my family and 2 other families. And it was down the road from a road called Capesville Road. That's Capesville with a C, if anybody's interested. There's a patch of woods if you're coming down Capesville Road from the area where the dairy farms come from. I think the road that it connects to is South Pemberton Road, I believe. and you're coming from the dairy farms, there's a patch of woods on the right. It's a pretty thick patch of woods, and that connects to Fort Dix, to the military base. It does go behind a middle school, but it's a pretty thick patch of woods. And as a kid, we used to ride our bikes back there or ride four-wheelers back there. So there's quite a bit of the woods that you can enjoy. And some of the hunters hunt back there, of course, with permission of the farmer, because I think he owns a lot of that property. And then on the other side of the road is cornfields. And those cornfields run along a set of railroad tracks that run through Pemberton into a town called Pemberton Borough. It connects. But right on the other side of that cornfield, where this road connects that my mom was on, there's an old concrete plant, and then my house is in front of that concrete plant. So it's very easy to find if you know where Catesville Road is. And the only thing that's really ever grown there, I think, is corn. Maybe every now and then they alternate with soybeans, but usually it's corn.
Are there any moving bodies of water in that area?
I do believe in the woods behind the school, I think there's a small stream back there. I could be wrong, that runs onto Fort Dix. I can't remember. It's been so long ago. I think we're talking close to 30 years ago because I'm 47, and this encounter happened when I was 15, so it was around 1995. But I do think there is a small stream back there that runs onto Fort Dix.
Well, that would make it a perfect habitat for them. All right, Kelly, please tell us about your mom's encounter. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay. So in 95, I was 15 years old. My mom had a really nice little blue Corvette that had the old body style. It was like a Stingray body style. I don't know what year it was, but she loved that car. And she was driving that car from South Pemberton Road onto Catesville Road down by the dairy farm. And you had to really take that road slow. If you were from that area, you knew not to go too fast because there's a little incline. And if you pop over that incline, there's a huge dairy farm that used to be really active right there. And every now and then a cow would get out and you could be looking at a cow in the middle of the road. You definitely don't want to hit a cow in a Corvette. That wouldn't be a pretty scene. So she was probably doing about 25, 30 miles an hour, came over the incline. The woods would be to her right-hand side, the cornfield to her left. And she's heading toward a road called Pemberton Fort Dix Road. That's the one that ran onto the base. So as she's doing 25, 30 miles an hour, she called it creature. This creature comes running out of the woods, and it never looked at her, she told me, but it basically leaped over the front end of the car. And she said it cleared it very easily, like a deer would. And she said it was massive. She'd never seen anything like this. And she said that it had a big fluffy tail. But the really weird thing about it, she said, was it had patchy fur like a hyena. And I looked at her when she was telling me this, because she said to me, "You're not going to believe what I saw." And I was like, okay, I'm game. But when she told me this, I said, "That's crazy. It sounds really crazy." And she said, "No." And she went on to further describe how massive this was. She said, if you picture, and she said, I don't know any other way to say this, but if you picture the head of a werewolf, a big, big wolf, and the patchy fur of a hyena, not the body style, just the patchy fur, the color. She said, that's what I saw. And it jumped over the car and ran into the cornfield, and it ran clear across the cornfield. She said it never stopped. It didn't hesitate, never turned its head to look at her. It was like it was chasing something. She said it was very intent on where it was going. It just ran. And she said it was pretty quick. So the area that it would have ran through the cornfield behind the concrete plant, would have dumped it right in our backyard over the railroad tracks. So, of course, me being a teenager, wanted to investigate. And of course, my mom, being a mom, said, I don't want you out there. This thing looked entirely too dangerous. It was massive. She said, so don't go out there. I don't want you looking into this. And I was like, okay, Mom, whatever you say. So the next day, of course, I grabbed my girlfriend who lived next door to me, and we did exactly what we were told not to. We went out back to the concrete plant, and I was looking around, and believe it or not, we found these huge tracks. They didn't really have dog pads like the typical dog would. It had claws. You could see the claws in the sand. The sand, it wasn't sandy like beach sand. It was kind of like topsoil sand. So it left a good track. There were claws on it. I have a size 8 foot. This was at least a size 10. It was a lot bigger than my foot. It had a dew claw. There was a claw in the back, just like a dog would have a dew claw. And these were really big. I call them claws because they were a lot bigger than nails. So I'm assuming they didn't retract because you could see the claws in the dirt. And it almost resembled a human print more than a dog print, than how dogs have the pads on the bottom. But it was big. And I saw those. We were walking around, and there was a big topsoil mound back there at the time that had a lot of weeds and overgrowth behind the plant. And it looked like there was an area that was dug into that, almost like a den, like a bear den. Of course, we didn't want to get too close, but there was also a bedding area. You could see in the tall, I guess it's oriental grass, you could see where something had been laying there. And the best way that I could describe the size of this, I've never been around bears, so I don't really know how big bears are. I know they're big, but I've never seen it. So the best way to describe this is, my dad was a truck driver, and he drove big rigs, 18-wheelers. The big tires, if you laid a tire down on this grass, it was that circumference. It was that big. So I knew that whatever this was and whatever my mom saw was huge. Like she said, it was massive. And there was nothing in New Jersey that I know of that's that big. I mean, we don't have apex predators in Pemberton. So I really don't know, aside from what she told me, what it could have been. I mean, it definitely outsized deer, even the biggest deer that I've ever seen.
Did she ever tell you if it was running on 2 legs or 4 legs that night?
It was on 4. I did ask her, I was like, well, describe how, and she said it just jumped over the car. It never got up on 2 legs. It ran on 4, and she said it was running really fast, like it had a place to go.
And she did say it never did focus on her.
No, she said it never turned her head. It never looked at her. But, I mean, it wasn't dark. It was daylight. So she got a really good look at it. Since it cleared, it literally jumped over the car.
Well, thank goodness it didn't focus on her.
Yeah, she was frightened for me because she knew how much I was always outside. And a lot of times I was back in that area because I had a 4-wheeler, and that's where me and my friends would always ride. It was really the only place we had to ride. It would take us through the woods, down the tracks, and she was very adamant on me not being back there.
And then the next day, you went back there to have a look around.
Of course, what else do teenagers do? Not so smart things.
No, I understand. Did she seem to have a lot of trouble dealing with that experience? You just said that she was really concerned about you and your safety, but how did she handle it?
I don't really think it bothered her in the sense, I don't think she had anything like PTSD or anything like that. Like I hear a lot of your callers because they have, those up close and personal. She was in the car. I think she kind of maybe felt that was her safety barrier. And I know that she wasn't the type of person that would go out there looking for this. So I don't really think she had a lot of problems. I know that she told my dad about it, and I don't think my dad was a real big believer. He's like, well, probably something just escaped from Six Flags down the road. So that was his kind of answer to it.
Well, it's a shame that he poo-pooed what she shared with him, but I guess that's pretty typical. That's what you would expect.
Yeah, I don't think he was a big believer. My dad was never really a big believer in anything paranormal. He kind of was a logical man who felt that everything had a logical explanation. So I think that was his kind of way of living and train of thought.
I see. That makes sense. When she told you about her experience, what were your thoughts on it?
Well, at first, I was just like, I didn't think she was crazy because my mom was not the kind of person who told tall tales. She did not like people that lied. She had a saying, my mom did. There were 3 things you don't do. You don't lie, you don't steal, and you don't cheat. That was her motto to me growing up. And I even tell my daughter that to this day. You don't lie, you don't steal, you don't cheat. And you kind of live by that. And that's what she did. She was not into tall tales and lying. It just wasn't in her nature. If my mom said something, I tended to believe her. And even though I kind of thought, well, maybe something did get out of Six Flags, out of the safari park. But I'm also thinking in the back of my mind, that's kind of a distance for this animal to get that far. But it wouldn't have been unheard of. It's not impossible, but it just didn't seem probable to me. And I think that there was something to what she was saying, which is why I did the dumb thing and went looking for it. I wanted to see it, but I definitely believed her, but I didn't have a good explanation as to what it could be, because at this time I was 15 and I'd never heard of a dog man, and no way would I have believed a werewolf. You know, when you think werewolf, you think of the movies, you know, somebody that turns into a creature, and that just doesn't make sense to me. A biological creature, yes. That was born that way and dies that way, yes. Human being changing, no. So I was trying to reconcile in my mind, well, what could this be? Because I know there's no predators in Pemberton.
Until the dogman showed up.
Right. Until the dogman showed up. I mean, it just, what happened, actually, we got out the encyclopedia because this was before Google and, you know, the internet. We didn't have cell phones at this time. So we actually went to the encyclopedia, and I said, well, let's humor my mom and see if we could find something that resembles this, or if we could find the actual creature. So we look under wolves, and we actually found a picture of, it's called a painted wolf, which I think a lot of people refer to now as the African dog. And she said to me, this is the closest thing that it resembles as far as the type of fur, the patchiness of the fur, the color. It was a little bit darker. It had more darker blotches than the painted dog did, or the painted wolf, the African dog. And she said it was 10 times bigger than that. She said it was massive. She said these things look like babies compared to this, what she saw. So it resembled, as far as fur, the patchiness, the African dog or a hyena, but size-wise, not even close. Oh, and the ears. She did say the ears were very pointy, whereas the African dog had more rounded ears. She said that was totally off as far as its head. She did tell me the ears were very pointy on the top of its head.
If the creature that your mom saw was 10 times that big, that's pretty disconcerting.
Yeah, and that was why she was like, I don't want you out back. This thing looked very dangerous. She said, what if you go back there and you come face to face with this? And I'm thinking, yeah, right. I've been back there every day this week, and I'd never seen anything like that, ever.
Well, thank goodness nothing bad happened to you. When you went to the scene of your mom's encounter the next day, you heard something you didn't expect to hear. Please tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, like I said, my girlfriend went with me that very next day. But the day after that, I went back out there again by myself. It was a little closer to dark. I thought, well, maybe, you know, I could hear something or see something. It was kind of an open area when you were walking from my backyard to the concrete plant. So I'm thinking I'll have enough space if there is something back there kind of hiding, you know, maybe I'll see it before I get up on it. This is, you know, a teenager's train of thought, not very smart, I know. But I go back there and I'm past the concrete plant and I hear this growl. And the best way that I can describe it is, I've been to the zoo, and you know when you hear a lion roar, how that just goes, it just emanates right through your whole body? Well, this growl, it wasn't that loud. It was a very low, guttural growl, very menacing, and it just kind of went through me. It was very scary, very eerie. It didn't sound like I was that close to it. It did sound a little bit off to the distance, kind of where the topsoil pile was, where I saw that hole that was dug into it, almost like a den. But I didn't go any further. I just stopped right where I was. I didn't want to push my luck. So I kind of pictured if this thing had the claws that I saw on its feet in the sand, I really didn't want those ripping into me. So I kind of slowly backed up, but I did see more tracks. There was definitely evidence that there was something there, and especially once I heard that growl, that just confirmed it for me. And I, in no way, shape, or form, doubted my mom from that point on. I knew there was something back there.
After you heard that growl that evening, did you swear off going back there?
Believe it or not, no. I still went back there, definitely in the daylight. I went more toward the morning hours, early afternoon. I didn't go back by the dirt pile. I didn't really go beyond the concrete plant, but I did still go back to the edge of my property. I really wanted to get a look at this thing, but I didn't want to get too close. And I still saw evidence. I still saw tracks. This went on off and on for the better part of the month. And after about 2.5, 3 more weeks of this, I didn't see any more evidence after that. It was like it just moved on. There was nothing, no more tracks, no more bedding area. It's just like it up and left. Maybe I was encroaching on it. I don't know, but I get the impression with that growl that it really wasn't too afraid of me. I think that growl was a warning for me to stay away from it. So that's why I didn't go any further after that, back into that area. I just kind of stayed on my property, but I could still see back there.
I'm glad you stayed away after you heard that growl.
Yeah, in fact, one night I was in my bedroom and I had my lights off. And my mom, she would sit on the back porch with her binoculars and watch. We had a lot of hummingbirds because she was an avid gardener and had beautiful plants in the backyard. So she was always watching the hummingbirds. And I sat in my bedroom one night looking out my side bedroom window, which you could see back there with the binoculars. And I could have swore I saw a big dark shadow, really big shadow back by the plant one night, but I couldn't really get a really good look at it. I wouldn't say that I had an encounter as far as sight because I didn't know what it was. It could have been a deer, but it looked a lot bigger than a deer to me.
Well, just might have been one. It's hard to say. It probably wasn't, but it's possible. You said your friend helped you look for evidence. How sure are you that she actually believed you?
At first, I don't think she really believed me at all, but she also knew my mom wasn't a storyteller. So that's what prompted her to go with me, I think. But once she saw the tracks, then she kind of was a little bit more on board. Unfortunately, she didn't hear the growl like I did. But I think after she saw the tracks, she was like, okay, there's something out here. But I don't know if she was convinced that it was some massive creature the size of a werewolf. But she went with me and she saw the tracks too.
Yeah, I'm sure she was starting to wonder what was going on when she saw the tracks.
Yeah, I think she was too. And in fact, she didn't go back there with me again after that. She was probably the smarter of the two.
Well, I hate to say it, but it sure sounds like she was. When you were in your 20s, you went to Italy and had an unusual experience of your own that might have been Dogman related. Please tell us about it.
Yeah, I was married to a guy that was in the military, my daughter's father. And when we were 22, well, I was 22, he was 24, we got stationed. Our first duty station was in Vicenza, Italy. And we wanted to get the whole Italian experience while we were there because we weren't sure how long we were going to be there. He was in a unit, it was the Southern European Task Force, and they were always gone. They were a rapid deployment force. They would get called, and you had to be on base within 30 minutes, ready to be deployed anywhere, wherever the Army sent you. So we lived about 15, 20 miles off base in a town called Montegalda. And the town, from what I understand, is a lot more grown up now than it was back then. But when I lived there, it was a very rural, kind of a farming community as well. It kind of reminded me of home in a way. And there were 2 other American families that lived there in my building, and then the rest was all Italian nationals. We were the only Americans there. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had. It really opened my eyes to the world because I did a lot of traveling while I was there. So one night, my husband was gone for a few weeks, and I was by myself, and I had my dog with me. I had a little Yorkie. And to kind of set the backdrop, across from my apartment, the road went into a T, and my apartment was at the head of that T. So the main road that ran through town ran right past my apartment. But then the long part of the T is where my apartment faced. So if you go out of my apartment and you walk down that road, you would cross, it was kind of like a cobblestone bridge or like a brick paver type style bridge back then. And there was a stream that ran, well, more like a creek that ran underneath the bridge. On the right side was a wood line. It wasn't a forest. It wasn't a real thick wood line, but it was woods. And then on the other side of that, if you were in my apartment, because I was on the 4th floor, you could see the farmer's field on the other side of that. But if you were on the bridge, all you could see is woods. You couldn't see the field on the other side. It was too thick. And then on the left side was kind of like the town square. It's where, like on Mondays, there were a lot of vendors that would come into town with different things, clothes, cheeses, meats, kind of like a little farmer's market, like a traveling farmer's market. And they would be there every Monday morning. So it was kind of nice, but it was more of a little, not a city, but more suburban, I guess you could call it. I definitely wouldn't call it a city. So the stream ran around that parking lot and further down, into the next town. But I was crossing with my dog. It was about 11 o'clock one night, and I'm walking, and there was really no one out. It was very quiet, and I could hear the stream, and I'm crossing the bridge going into the next town, which is called Montegadella. But as I'm walking, my dog stopped on a dime. And he'd never done that. He actually was acting like he was scared. And he stopped and he would not budge. And he was a little 8-pound little Yorkie. So he's looking up at me like, please pick me up. I don't want to be here. And I'm like trying to pull him along and he's not budging. He was not moving another step. And then I heard this growl. And I'm thinking to myself, oh no, here we go. Because I had a neighbor who was behind my apartment. He had 2 really huge German Shepherds. I don't know who the breeder of these dogs were, but they were big. They were probably 1.5 times the size of a normal German Shepherd. They were really big dogs. And they were trained, but they would bark every now and then. And I'd never heard them howl. I heard them growl a couple times when I would walk past them, but these are not dogs I'd want to tangle with. So I picked my dog up because I was afraid if one of these dogs got loose, they would go after my dog. I picked him up and I'm standing there and I'm hearing this growl and it's coming from like not directly under the bridge, but kind of along the bottom, the side, maybe I couldn't see. And I really didn't want to walk to the side and stick my face down there. So I didn't. I stayed where I was and I heard the growl. It was very, like I said before, very guttural. And it really kind of sounded reminiscent of the growl that I heard when I was a kid, when I was 15, more than it did those dogs. And I got a really creepy feeling like something was watching me. And it was bad. I really didn't like it. So I knew enough from watching a lot of nature shows that if you think you're in the presence of a predator or a dog that's even going to attack, you back up, you don't put your back to it, and you don't run because it kicks in that instinct. So I backed up. And I'm backing up off the bridge and I'm still hearing it. But I continued to back up slowly. I never saw it. It didn't seem like it was moving. It seemed like it was staying where it was. And it just gave me the feeling that it wasn't one of those dogs because the behavior that those dogs displayed when I would walk past them is they would bark and run along the fence as you were walking. They would follow you. This didn't do that. This stayed where it was. So when I got back up in my apartment, I looked off my balcony and I'm looking and I can't see anything. Even though it's dark and it was a moonlit night and there were lights in the parking lot, I didn't see anything. So I went to bed. I couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning. And we had these windows that would open outwards, kind of like a French door, but they would open outwards. So I had my windows open because it was a nice night. And about 2-3 o'clock in the morning, somewhere in between then, I heard this howl. And I'd never heard it before, and I'd never heard it after that. It was a one-time thing, but if you've ever watched that movie Dog Soldiers, in the very beginning, there's a howl. It sounded very close to that, but a little meatier, a little deeper. But it sounded like that. It didn't sound like a dog.
So when you say it didn't sound like a dog, you don't see there being any way that either of those 2 German Shepherds could have been what you heard howling that night?
I don't know. It's not impossible, I wouldn't say, but it just didn't sound like them. It was a different tone. It sounded deeper. The only word that pops into my mind is meatier, if that makes sense. But it was long. If you hear a wolf howl in the wild, it's like a long howl. It was like that, but it was deep. And I'd never heard these dogs do that. They always barked and carried on. I'd never heard them howl. And I lived there about a year and a month. So never heard it again.
Well, thank goodness. You had another unusual experience in the Wharton State Forest. What happened that time?
Well, I used to work in Atlantic City, and I was driving. I used to have to leave really early in the morning, and I would get up for work at 3:30, and I would be on the road by 4:30. And I was driving down 563. I would go through a town called Chatsworth, and I'm driving down 563, and there's a split in the road. Now, the road, if you go to the left, it would take you to a town called New Gretna, which ultimately would dump you onto the Garden State Parkway, which is the way that I went to go to work. If you went to the right, it would take you to a town called Greenbank. I just never took that way. The other way was more, it would take me to the parkway where the other way didn't. So about a half a mile past the split in the road, I saw this set of red eyes, and it was about 7.5, 8 feet off the ground. And I saw kind of a black shadow where the body would be, I think. Because at first I'm thinking, well, maybe there's a deer standing on its hind legs. I've seen that before out in the woods where the deer will get the leaves off the branches that are higher. But this seemed bigger than a deer, the mass of the shadow. I didn't see an actual body. I didn't see what it was. I saw the red eyes when my headlights hit it. And I slowed down, but I didn't stop. And it just blinked once or twice. But other than that, I just kept going. I wasn't going to stop because it's very, very isolated out there, and I was by myself.
Well, that's awfully unnerving. Sometimes it's easier if you can actually see what you're looking at than having to guess just because you see eye shine.
Right. And that's what I was doing, is I was guessing. So it could have been anything. I don't really know, but it just seemed like 7.5, 8 feet off the ground was kind of tall. I don't know what shines red eye shine, so I couldn't think of anything that it could have been besides maybe a deer trying to get a plant, but it just didn't seem like it was moving. It was very still. I would assume if a deer is trying to get a plant, it's going to be moving because it's going to be trying to eat. But it was very still.
Red eye shine 7 to 8 feet off the ground, that does eliminate a lot of possibilities.
That's kind of what I thought too, but I really was not thinking Dogman because I don't think at this point I'd even heard the term Dogman yet. I mean, I just recently heard about Dogmen, in the last 2-3 years maybe, and it was just in passing, just reading about different cryptids, and because I find the paranormal interesting. And living here in New Jersey, I do want to mention there's a lot of folklore in New Jersey, and especially in the Wharton State Forest, down in that area where I would travel to go to work, you have Smithville, which is where supposedly Leeds Point, where the Jersey Devil's from. And I can't honestly say that I'm a big believer in the Jersey Devil. I haven't seen it, so I'm not going to say it doesn't exist, but I have a hard time believing that one. I don't know why, I just do. But I guess because of the whole, it's been 200-300 years now, and I just find it hard to believe for something to live that long. But I do believe in certain paranormal aspects, so I'm not going to completely rule it out. I'm not going to say someone else is crazy for something they've seen because I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I hope it's not real, but I guess you never know. When you were a kid, you had some unnerving experiences at a place called Apple Pie Hill. Please tell us more about those experiences.
Yeah, my friends and I, we had our four-wheelers and we used to ride back there a lot. And there was a ranger station, I guess it's a fire tower, and we would a lot of times grab lunch at the local pizza place and take it up there and eat at the top of the fire tower, which we weren't supposed to do, but, teenagers. So we would climb to the top of this, and you could see out really far distance. You could see the canopy of the forest. You really couldn't see into the forest, but you could see the whole forest, the tops of the trees, for miles, especially on a clear day. It was really pretty out there. So we spent a lot of time out at Apple Pie Hill and out riding past that in all the trails, and there was a couple sand pits out there we used to ride in. And I spent a really big part of my childhood and my teenage years before I started driving on my four-wheeler out in the woods. I mean, you could pretty much say I almost lived out there, in the daylight hours. So we would go to the top of this fire tower and eat lunch and just hang out. And I would say about a half a dozen times on different occasions, we would hear this loud, shrill shrieking. One time I remember it sounding like a howl, but for the most part, it sounded like a woman screaming almost. Just a little bit different, but a shriek, like someone was, I guess someone was being murdered is the best way to describe it. It was just a shriek. I'd never heard anything like it. It was crazy. And I would say over the course of 6 or 7 years, I heard it about a half a dozen times. And it was always in that area. I never really heard it anywhere else in the forest. It was in the area by Apple Pie Hill and off of Route 72, which would ultimately take you down to the shore, like Long Beach Island and that area. But I don't know what you could mistake it for unless someone was out there being murdered, but 6 times, I doubt it. It was just loud and shrieky. I don't even want to call it screaming. It was a shriek, but it was long-winded and loud. It echoed through the forest. We really didn't know what it was. And like I said, none of us were ever thinking Dogman. I mean, we never heard of a Dogman. So that wasn't even on our radar. And I'd never heard of a Bigfoot in New Jersey. And we were like, oh yeah, it's probably the Jersey Devil, just joking and laughing. But in all seriousness, there's no apex predators in New Jersey. So we wouldn't think that it would be something like this that could potentially be life-threatening. We didn't know what it was. And during this time, I can't say that I saw any tracks or anything like that because I really wasn't looking. We were riding motorcycles, 4-wheelers. This was before my mom's encounter a lot of these shrieks, so I didn't even have that in the back of my mind at this point because, like I said, we started riding out there when I was about 12, and I stopped out there when I was just before I turned 17 because at 16 and a half, you could get your driver's permit here, so that's when I kind of cooled going out in the woods when I was about 16 and a half. So there was only about a half a dozen times that we heard this, but most of it was when I was younger and it was before my mom's encounter. So I never even had that in the back of my mind that it could be something dangerous. We just didn't know what it was.
I see. That makes sense. Please talk us through what happened to you at a place called Hampton Furnace.
My second husband and I, we started dating after my first husband and I separated, and I was about 33, 34 years old, somewhere in that age range. And he was an avid hunter. He still is. And we used to love just taking a nice moonlit drive through the forest. He had a Ford, a big F-250, so we didn't have any problems getting stuck, 4-wheel drive. And we would ride out there at night. Some of his family owned cranberry bogs out there, and he grew up out there off of a road called East Stokes Road. And that's in the town. It used to be called Indian Mills, but now it's Chemung. And the main highway is Route 206, but we would just ride out there and just enjoy the forest, the sounds of the critters, the bullfrogs and the crickets. And there's a road out there that runs off of 206 that's right across from Atzion Lake. Atzion Lake is a pretty big lake in Chemung. And it's a place where a lot of campers go to camp in the forest, and they have access to the lake, and there's a lot of canoeing and that type of thing that goes on there. In fact, it runs all the way down through Greenbank, and there's a couple canoe companies out there where you can canoe for hours. They have 8-hour treks out there that runs all through Wharton State Forest. And we used to do that a lot. But we were out there one night. It was really late, probably 11, 12 o'clock, and we're driving around, and the craziest thing happened. We pull into Hampton Furnace, it's an old concrete foundation. I don't really know what it was way back in the day. That we're talking the early 1900s. The only thing left of this place is the foundation. And it's an old stagecoach road back before there was any paved roads back then. So we're riding around, and he turns into Hampton Furnace, which is where the ruins are. And this fawn baby deer still had its spots, ran, and our truck is moving. We're like crawling. You have to go really slow back there. But this deer ran under the bottom of the truck. And you could hear its back hitting, and of course he slammed the brakes on. You could hear it hitting the bottom of the truck. This thing was running like something was chasing it. It came out of the woods. It went under the truck on my side, and it went out on his side, and it crossed the foundation. I mean, we could see it clear as day, the spots on his back, because by now we're stopped, and he just looked at me and he said, I have never seen anything like that. That's crazy. And he said, I wonder if something was chasing it. We don't think its mom was around because we didn't see any other deer. It was just the baby. And I don't know, it must have been so panicked it just ran under the truck and it just kept running. It must not have been hurt because it kept running. So we stopped. We were there for a minute or two and we had the windows cracked. We were listening. We didn't hear anything. And we drive around the ruins and come back out and go about a half a mile up the road. And he backs into this. It was an old road that had just grown over. A lot of the roads back there where people don't travel on them, they just grow over. The forest takes over. So he had backed into that and we were sitting there talking and we had the windows cracked a couple inches. And he said to me, he goes, do you hear that? And I said, no. Do I hear what? He said, do you hear that? And I'm listening and I said, I don't hear anything. He goes, that's my point. He said, it's very quiet. You could actually hear a pin drop in the forest. No bullfrogs, no crickets. I had never been out there and experienced that. All the times in the woods, I don't think I've ever heard it that quiet. And I said, no. I said, that's really weird. So we're sitting there listening. We don't hear anything. But my husband's not a paranoid type person. I've never seen him afraid of anything. And like I said, he's an avid hunter. He said to me, he goes, I don't like this. He goes, I don't have a good feeling about this. I feel like we're being watched. And it's funny because the same time he said that to me, kind of the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And I felt like there was somebody or something out there with us. I really felt hard, like we were being watched. And we couldn't see anything and we couldn't hear anything. But it was just a very eerie quiet. And he said, I think we should get out of here. I don't feel like we're safe. And I'm like, I'm all with it. You know, if you don't feel safe, then I definitely don't feel safe. So I was all up for leaving because for him to be nervous like that, I've never seen that. All the times we've been in the woods, and he grew up in the woods, in those particular woods. So yeah, we didn't hang around to see what was causing that or why it was so quiet. But between the deer, the way that the deer was acting, that baby, and just the quiet, and we were only a half a mile from Hampton Furnace, it was just really eerie, and I never felt that way out there. I felt like Wharton State Forest was a second home to me. So we still went out there after that, but definitely not as much as we used to, and we definitely didn't stop in that area. He was just really creeped out there, and that was a shame. Whatever feeling that he had, he wasn't one that would really go into a lot of detail and tell me his feelings about if something bothered him. He kind of kept to himself. But we didn't go back out in that area and sit. And to me, that was a shame because he really enjoyed being out there. So whatever it was bothered him to that point where he didn't want to go back out there. And I'd never seen that with him before.
If it bothered him that much, it must have been pretty intense.
Yeah, I've never seen him scared of anything. I didn't think anything shook him. I mean, he was always kind of a wild child, I guess you could say, growing up, and kind of still has that wild heart and just not afraid of anything. But whatever that was, it really scared him. It spooked him. And that in turn scared me.
Yeah, sounds like it did spook him. Your husband's cousin told you she had seen some crazy things where she used to live. Did she ever give you an idea of what she might have seen?
She wasn't sure because she hadn't actually seen the creature or whatever was causing this, but she lived out near Greenbank, which was on the other side of the forest from Hampton Furnace. If you follow that road out, it would kind of dump you in her front yard. So she was out in a very isolated, woodsy part of the forest. And they had a lot of animals. She was telling us, we were kind of getting in the truck to leave, and she was saying something about some of her animals. One of her animals was missing, and one had been killed. She didn't really go into a lot of detail about how it was killed other than she didn't know what could have caused those types of wounds. It was not shredded, but it was attacked by something. And she didn't say that it had been eaten, but she said it was attacked and killed. And then I think it was her dog that was missing and the goat that was killed. And, you know, she had a lot of chickens and stuff like that. She didn't make any mention of the chickens or anything, but she did say that she had never had that happen before. And then that one day, there's an animal missing and an animal dead. So she didn't know what could have caused it because New Jersey is not known for a lot of predators. And I know there are bears. There were bears that were released many, many years ago in the forest, but I had never heard of anyone having an encounter with a bear in that forest like they do sometimes in northern New Jersey. They tend to have more. In fact, there was a hiker killed in northern New Jersey a few years ago by a bear encounter. But we never had anything like that in southern Jersey where I'm from. So she didn't know what it could have been.
Well, as you know, since you never saw what it was that had done those things, I guess we're going to have to just guess on what it was.
Right.
You told me in the pre-interview that you'd like to become a dogman researcher. How sure are you that you'd like to do that?
It's funny. I would like to network with people and research these cryptids. I think that there is definitely a biological creature that's behind this. And I'm very interested. I've always wanted to write a book. Now, whether I take that anywhere or not, I've been doing some research. I call it armchair research from different books and materials I find on the internet. But I would like to be more active in researching these in the field. Now that my daughter's older and I do have more time, I want to get out there and do this. I really want to do this. But then there's that common sense part of you that tells you, man, maybe this is dangerous, which I'm sure it is, but I'm not going to go out there by myself and do anything dumb, I guess I'm going to call it. Go out there and try to, I'm going to go find a dog man and by myself. I don't think that's realistic, nor do I think it's smart. So I would like to network with people, and I'm not opposed to driving in my surrounding states, New York or Pennsylvania, to learn. I want to learn. I am always up for learning something new. So who knows? Maybe I would get involved in this and then realize that maybe this isn't my cup of tea. But I don't foresee that. I find this topic fascinating, and I'm always up to learn something new. And I think there's a lot of people that have enough time and years behind them that they have a lot of useful information that if they're willing to teach me, I'm willing to learn.
As far as your interest in becoming a researcher goes, you know what they say, be careful what you wish for.
Very true. You just might get it.
That's true. If a researcher in the Jersey area would like to contact you, how could they do that?
I'm on Facebook. They can look me up, Kelly Vaughn. It's VAUGHN. And all they have to do is friend request me, and I'm there on Facebook.
Can you describe your profile picture on Facebook so that they'll know when they find the right Kelly Vaughn?
Sure. It's a picture of me, and I think you can see part of my daughter. She's looking probably about 16, 17 years old, and I've got a nursing scrub top on, so you can't miss it. I've got a green butterfly nursing scrub top.
Oh, that makes it easy. Before we get out of here, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Just that I would like to thank you for allowing me to come on the show and share my story, my mom's story, and that I'm able to contact some of these people, or they're able to contact me and get involved with possibly researching. And I feel better now that I was able to talk about, what she had been through and some of the things that I'd been through, and my possible ability to learn more about this. I find it very fascinating. So I really want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks again so much for coming on and sharing these experiences. I really appreciate it. Have a great night.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye. If you've had a dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.